While everybody was distracted with America's election of Donald Trump, the sixth largest bank in the entire world has just quietly accumulated $1.5 billion worth of Bitcoin. Of course, we're talking about Goldman Sachs, but I just want to remind you guys, they are not the only multi-trillion-dollar bank quietly getting into Bitcoin. We can see the list that we're going to be breaking down today of many familiar multi-trillion-dollar banks who have been FOMOing into Bitcoin at a pretty rapid rate. So today I want to be talking about what is going on. Are these banks potentially signaling something very interesting for Bitcoin and their intentions with Bitcoin? Are they going to start custodying Bitcoin? Are they going to let you borrow against your Bitcoin? These are all questions I want to explore with you guys today, but I first want to show you the chronological timeline. Let's take a look at this article. Just after the Bitcoin ETFs were launched, all of these multi-trillion-dollar banks began FOMOing into Bitcoin. At the time, Chase Bank led the charge with a $206 million investment. Then we had Morgan Stanley. Then we had Goldman Sachs, who we're talking about today, that behemoth $2.8 trillion bank. BNY Mellon, Barclays, Standard Chartered, Citibank, Wells Fargo's, Deutsche Bank. The reason why I want to show you this list is because all these banks have a similar allocation to Bitcoin. Have a look at this: 150 million, 180 million, 120 million, 170 million, 120 million, 270, and 206 million. Don't you think it's interesting that these guys kind of move in packs? They kind of move in waves. And now Goldman Sachs just quietly doubled their Bitcoin allocation in the last quarter. The question I want to ask you is, are we about to see many other multi-trillion-dollar banks also double their Bitcoin allocation? Maybe, just maybe, we might. Because I think it's pretty interesting that this is the news right here. I like how this tweet was worded. While you were scared, Goldman Sachs bought 1.6 billion in Bitcoin ETFs. Now, I wasn't playing around with the numbers in the title today. Goldman Sachs, as we can see, has around $2 to $3 trillion of assets under management, depending upon what you're measuring and when you're looking at it. But the thing that's a little bit less subjective is their SEC filings. We know for a fact that Goldman Sachs, as well as another multi-trillion-dollar bank such as Morgan Stanley, continue growing their Bitcoin exposure. Let's dive into the SEC filing in just a little bit more detail before we have a look at the other bank quietly 5xing its Bitcoin holdings. So we can see Goldman Sachs has been doubling its holdings nearly every quarter. This is the thing that I find really interesting. This is having a look at what Goldman Sachs did in late 2024. We can see at the time, it added about 300 million to its portfolio of Bitcoin ETFs, taking it to 700 million. So it doubled from around 300 to 700 million. And what did they do just recently? What was the news we found out today? They just bought another 1.6 billion. So it's nearly as if every quarter Goldman Sachs is doubling their Bitcoin exposure, which is pretty crazy to think about. What happens if they just keep continuing to double their Bitcoin exposure? Well, we are going to talk about the supply suffocation that I believe we're seeing today. Most evident when we take a look at charts like these. We did a live stream on the whales who are creating a supply suffocation earlier today. I won't rehash that video, but what I will say is that new whales, signified by this purple part of this chart, are aggressively FOMOing into Bitcoin. In today's video, I want to talk about who those new whales are, because I think it might be Goldman Sachs or the other multi-trillion-dollar banks who came out at the Davos World Economic Forum conference 2 weeks ago talking about their Bitcoin exposure and their bullishness on Bitcoin. little bit of a backflip seems to be happening amongst the world's most influential bankers. We're going to leave our theories and our speculations to the side for just a moment. What I do want to do is have a look at the other banks who appear to be jumping into Bitcoin, because it wasn't just Goldman Sachs who made a little bit of a move into Bitcoin recently. There are others. Despite them being smaller. We can see another little bank, PNC Bank, has gone from holding $10 million of Bitcoin to 67 million. Again, 67 million is no chump change. It's a sizable amount of Bitcoin. And I think it's becoming clear at this stage that banks from all around the world are FOMOing into Bitcoin in a really big way. If we jump on over to this little chart here, we can see BlackRock is by far and away the most popular choice for a lot of these banks. You might be able to read in between the lines there a little bit and start connecting some dots that may or may not be there. We start talking about, all right, who are the banks that BlackRock's friends with? How much Bitcoin do they own? Just a rabbit hole for you guys to explore on your own. But something that's not speculation is the fact that BlackRock IBIT right here, signified by this big, is that turquoise blue colored bar, is showing us that IBIT has 527,000 Bitcoin. They're approaching 3%. That would be a 630,000 Bitcoin stack. And they really are beginning to run away in the race that is the race to accumulate Bitcoin. Maybe I'll show you guys a really nice little visualization that does show us this race, because we can see it took a little while for BlackRock to take the lead. They were not the leader in the early days, but they did quickly become the leader in the early days. And they've really kind of put some distance between them and the rest of the ETFs more recently. So the ETFs is a little bit more of a winner-take-all game, as we can see by this little visualization. McLovin makes an interesting point. Maybe he knew where I was going to take this video. Ever since the ETFs have launched, we've been hearing a lot of rumors about these whales buying Bitcoin. Price isn't moving a ton. Is it being suppressed? We won't be covering that in today's video, but to confirm what McLovin is talking about, it is very clear that the whales are buying Bitcoin. The whales are aggressively buying Bitcoin. Like we showed in an earlier live stream, it is mimicking what happened in 2024. And now we're slowly starting to see a little bit of, let's call it clarity over who some of these whales are. It is the biggest banks in the world. I'm still shocked at this little chart here. We can see even before the ETFs were launched, there were some warning signs that banks such as Wells Fargo, HSBC, Citibank, Commonwealth Bank, the largest bank in Australia, my country, BNY Mellon, Goldman Sachs, and Morgan Stanley were all positioning themselves to come into Bitcoin. The warning signs were there to those paying attention. This is an old graphic breaking down all of that. But the whales are here, and your chance to front run the whales maybe just could be running out. Again, we always encourage you guys, front run the whales while you can. Time to buy Bitcoin under $100,000 could be rapidly disappearing. We may or may not be running out of time for that, which is why I always encourage you guys, don't wait. Get started on your Bitcoin buying journey today. We believe the best place for you to start that buying journey is with Rhino Bitcoin. As we can see, Rhino has a super intuitive, easy to use user interface. We think they're a great place for new people to get started with their Bitcoin buying journey. Not intimidating to use Rhino. And speaking about things that are not intimidating, they're even giving away $10 of free Bitcoin to everybody who signs up using a promo code Bitcoin News. It's one word, Bitcoin News. Check out what Rhino Bitcoin is doing and front run these institutions while we can. I do think time is running out on that front. It's pretty crazy. I want to break down in a little bit more detail exactly what this $2.8 trillion bank Goldman Sachs is buying. Right now, they have $2.3 billion in Bitcoin ETF exposure. They've got about $2 billion of IBIT, $300 million of Fidelity's Bitcoin ETF, and they've got a little bit of, let's call it loose change in their GBDC exposure, holding $3.6 million. I think the most interesting line here is the fact that they have increased their exposure by 700 million in Q4 last year. Goldman Sachs is scrambling to get themselves some Bitcoin exposure. And not financial advice, but that's something I'm doing myself. I'm scrambling to get Bitcoin exposure. I'm sure many of the 1,300 of you guys tuning in between Twitter and YouTube are probably doing the same. There could be some people in the live chat scrambling to get some Bitcoin exposure. Bitcoin Imagineer says that the tsunami, that's it. He just says the tsunami. Simon makes a great point. So yes, a lot of banks are buying a lot of Bitcoin right now, and a lot of whales are buying a lot of Bitcoin right now. But a lot of long-term holders are selling their Bitcoin right now. This is why the price hasn't been moving aggressively. Typically, the long-term holders, the hodlers who have held Bitcoin for a long time, they always sell some coins and they take some profit once we break all-time high. What could be a little bit more interesting this time around is the fact that we have a little bit of a new dynamic. We have ETFs, we have institutions, we have all of these massive banks trying to get Bitcoin exposure. We have the Michael Saylor copycats coming in and now buying these coins off the long-term holders. The long-term holders, the hodlers, I believe maybe they used to be the smart money. Maybe the BlackRocks and the institutions and the micro strategies are becoming the new smart money. Just a hypothetical thought experiment for you guys to think about between now and our next live stream tomorrow. So with all that said, thank you so much to everyone who tuned in.